Hey, White Sox fans, it's Brett Ballantini here with South Side Sox Podcast number 15. And before we get into it, I'm going to have to issue an apology and a happy birthday. He's a Christmas Eve baby. Leonard Gore. He was supposed to be with me on Podcast 15. And of course, technical difficulties, which really means user error, will prevent that episode from being aired. Hopefully number 16 or maybe number 17, maybe after the holidays. Lenny can hop back on with us and talk about all the great stuff. Let me tell you guys, it was probably the best podcast that's really ever been recorded by South Side Sox. So it's a shame. Hopefully we can come close to duplicating it. All the witticisms, all the cleverness, all the great insight that you come to look for from South Side Sox. And our podcast will be duplicated when I'm able to talk to Leonard again. But again, apologies and also happy birthday. This is publishing on your birthday, Leonard Gore. So have a happy one. And happy holidays. On that note, the other person who has had a podcast nullified and vanished in my history as an engineer is, remarkably enough, our guest for the now official redo of Southside Sox Podcast 15. And that's Smokin' Joe Resis. Welcome back to the podcast, Joe.
Yes, thank you for having me. It's nice to be back. And yes, happy birthday to Leonard.
And actually, I'm saying welcome back, but looking through the archives, I think this is your first official Southside Sox podcast. I think we talked at least a couple times for the Southside Hit Pen one. And let's face it, the lines were very, very, very blurred between those two. But officially, at least, you can't scroll down and hear anything from Joe Resis on our little megaphone player that's running with this because you have not yet appeared with us on Southside Sox. But it is good to have you. And let's kick off. Very exciting holiday season. It's going to be a terrific podcast. So why not start out talking a little bit about Tony La Russa, the topic that no one wants to talk about. And let's not go through all the mundane stuff. Let's just get right into the fact that the White Sox have promised that if another mistake is made by Tony, which we're going to presume is drunk driving, but it could be a number of other things that are significant enough to have him sanctioned legally or by the league. I think the question I'm going to pose to you, Joe, is do you think the White Sox will back that up? Do you think they'll use it as an excuse to get out of the situation with Tony La Russa? Or do you think, in fact, they will double down and say, well, that was a foul tip. That wasn't a strike three, so he gets yet another chance?
I would lean toward it being more of a foul tip than something more severe. It seems like there is just a ton of loyalty within the organization, and it really is, it's a good thing in some situations, but this would not be one of them. And it has been, some of their statements have just left a lot to be desired. And as far as them taking appropriate actions if he takes another misstep, I think that's something that I would have to see before I believe it.
I know people are, tired. We're all tired of this topic. We didn't want this to be a topic in the first place. Nobody presumed that Tony La Russa was going to be the next manager of the White Sox. And when his name was bandied about, I don't know, it was thought of as a goof. The fact that it was Bob Nightingale, AKA Ken Williams, tweeting it, maybe gave, let the hair stand up on everyone's neck just a little bit, but still you'd think this can't actually be. So, let's be clear. This isn't something we necessarily want to be talking about or having to be beating to death. I know a lot of people are sort of willing or ready to move on and are starting even to reprimand those who continue to keep this sort of out there and bat it around. But given this team, given the upward trajectory of the team, given this being a pretty crucial time, not that it's never a crucial time when you're hiring a manager, this is a very delicate time and a chemistry on the team that's, it's significant. And what was built under Ricky Renteria is definitely going to take some sort of different direction now. And maybe in some ways it'll be good, given the fact that Tony La Russa is probably going to be a little more of a taskmaster. He's going to be a little less of a father figure to the players, which Ricky might have embraced to a fault, perhaps, in the clubhouse. This isn't something we should be blowing off, extended legal issues or not. This is still something pretty significant to have to address, at least before bats and balls start getting cracked out of bags in Arizona, right?
Absolutely. It's been, yeah, of course, the legal issues here are not the only question marks that are raised. It's even like prior to the details of his arrest were made public just pretty shortly after he was hired. There were a lot of question marks with good reason about, is he really the best fit? He hasn't been he retired 9 years ago, and obviously it's very difficult to dispute his success as a manager, but it has been a while, and with a team that has a very I feel like a very united core that is kind of built a reputation on changing the game and kind of challenging the old standards and the unwritten rules. Is Tony La Russa going to be okay with that kind of identity? And overall, I'm struggling to be optimistic that he's going to kind of let the players be themselves. But certainly hoping for the best in that regard, and I'm hopeful at least that he'll be flexible with that.
Yeah, Tony seems to be challenging the written rules. So, I mean, there's definitely challenging the rules going on.
Yes.
It's just not really those unwritten ones. And clearly, I'm not sure change the game is going to be the hashtag slogan going into the 2021 season. I'm not sure what it is. I don't know if they've come up with anything, but boy, I bet you they're scratching their heads bloody trying to figure out what that's going to be, given the PR disaster or nightmare that's been handed to them with this sort of enforced hiring. In brighter news, Joe, just this week, James Fox was one of the people who brought this out, but I think it was Ben Badler who broke the story, if I got his name right, in Baseball America, that the disputed first name of Yoelki Céspedes, half brother of Jonas Céspedes, is signing with the White Sox, and that'll be announced next month. And this is in addition to the fact that the White Sox have already brought in pretty much the top arm coming out of Cuba in this class, even though the classes are defined sort of vaguely. Norge, Vera, again, might not exactly have that right, but two pretty plum picks, arguably maybe the top two names coming out of Cuba, are both coming to the White Sox. Obviously, you got to feel good about that, but it's nice that there's even balance between an arm and a bat.
Yes, it's definitely been nice to see their success with being able to sign those players. Céspedes is a very interesting prospect for sure, and he doesn't really have any clear weaknesses on his scouting report. Obviously, he is, compared to the other international signings, he is certainly on the older side at 23, but he is a lot closer to the major leagues than the vast majority of them as well. And he'll probably need, most are estimating he will have about a year or so in the minors before he'll be able to make it to the show. And that's been a bit of a good thing to see for sure. And and of course the addition of the 20-ish pounds of muscle is that works in his favor, and certainly has a very, very strong build, and for someone of his stature, like a very large amount of power in his bat. And it hasn't been, he hasn't gotten a ton of playing time the past couple of seasons, but the overall reviews are positive, and it's not easy to be the number one international prospect in MLB pipeline rankings, but that is the rank that he has earned, and that does seem to be deserved at this point in time.
Yeah, when you're thinking about the fact that it seems to me that some of the projections of him getting to the majors are a little optimistic, especially given the fact he hasn't had a lot of playing time, though I guess he's an older prospect. But even if you look at the fact that Luis Robert took 3 years, and that's with injury, and if you're projecting him as a similar type player, and again, Luis Robert is probably in a slightly different class, but I think the comparisons aren't completely invalid, especially given some of the things that Cespedes is struggling with, including seeing and making contact with breaking pitches. Even if you were to say, okay, a couple of years, healthy, a couple of years, well, that still puts him potentially in the majors, maybe even at the start of the 2023 season, which is certainly not, they're not burning money. He's still just approaching 30. He's going to be able to give the Sox his prime years. So even sort of worst case, if you want to call it that, scenario with this, I think you're still going to get a guy who's going to be able to produce, hopefully at the major league level, and maybe very significantly on a pretty short time frame, even if some folks are jumping ahead. I mean, the guy I'm going to rely on most, Phil on Twitter out of Cuba, who's done a lot of scouting of him, is to me truly one of the foremost Cuban baseball experts. I think he was projecting him to begin like A+, high A ball, maybe getting to AA and playing some fall league in his first year. And that would set him on a trajectory to perhaps touch the majors, maybe the end of that second season stateside, or again, maybe just come out of spring training in 2023. I don't think that's anything to shake a stick at, given the fact that the system itself, it's not as if Mike Rodolfo's crawling over Blake Rutherford, who's elbowing Luis Gonzalez to get into the majors. All of these guys are sort of pointing at the other, saying, okay, you first. So there's a clear lane for Céspedes to get to the majors, and, it's out there for him.
Absolutely. He'll have to fight Adam Eaton for the spot in 2021, but
perhaps literally.
Yes. But we don't have to discuss that yet.
I was just going to say.
But as far as the outfield depth in the farm system right now, there's not a lot there. It's kind of, made up of a lot of guys who have kind of struggled at the AA level quite a bit. The Birmingham Park is pretty pitcher friendly, but it's still, those hitters you mentioned have still not lived up to the hype that was initially given to them. And all is not lost for them yet, but they are certainly behind schedule and, have, took a step back in 2019, which was the most recent season there was a minor league season.
I mean, and let's not sleep on Vera as well. That's very significant to get a guy who could be projected again. I think these things are always sort of optimistic, but a guy who could project to a number one arm in a rotation is nothing to shake your head at. He's, I think, just going to maybe 20. I mean, this would be his age 20 season, I think, coming in. So clearly he's young, whatever the exact age. Very young. He's already pitched a season in Cuba and held his own pretty well, 11 starts, some pretty nice numbers. These are two players who are perhaps legitimately cracking, if not a top 5 White Sox prospects. I think both probably easily are right there or inside top 10 prospects. And again, that's nothing to sneeze at, given that in a sense, this is almost, this is extracurricular. This is bonus. Every team does need to pluck international players in order to be successful. Not every team does. And the White Sox have been on the outside looking in past years too, where we've sort of whiffed on the potential to add an impact player or 2 or 3. The Sox have been a lot better about that recently, certainly not just with the headline signings like Luis Robert, but something like what's being done here, giving the White Sox, I don't think it's probably disputable, the best international class for 2020 or 2021 is significant. And thank goodness they're doing it, because these are 2 plum players to now have in the system.
Yes, absolutely. It's great to have them both in the system. And as far as Vera goes, he's another player without any clear weaknesses as far as his scouting grades. And you were correct about the age 20 thing. Doesn't turn 21 until June, so he's still very young. And his best pitch seems to be his fastball, but he seems to be quite versatile as far as his breaking pitches. Like the curveball, the slider, and the changeup all have above average grades. A lot of times the risk with younger pitchers is, the risk of injury and having a bit of a bigger risk factor as a result of that. But I think he is certainly less risky than say using a top 10 pick in the draft on a high school pitcher for sure. Like I would much rather sign Vera than do that, without a doubt. And that is certainly a good piece of information. And he has also gotten he has also impressed many scouts as far as like his baseball IQ, which is not an easy thing to find for 20-year-olds a lot of the time. So having that on his record is also a reason for optimism. And as far as just international arms, it's tough to do better than Vera, I would say. And so yeah, absolutely, great job by the organization in bringing him in.
And if it's a stretch or not, let's just be lazy and say, all right, this is like getting another Jared Kelly. I mean, the fact that you've added Garrett Crochet, Jared Kelly, and now Norge Vera to within a calendar year, or not a calendar year, but in a matter of months, that's no small feat. And the fact that these guys all seem ready to hit the ground running. I mean, of course, Vera's going to need a significant season. His frame is still filling out. But at the same time, he's also pitched professionally in Cuba, as a teenager. So it's not as if he's going to be wide-eyed either. You could argue his development, or at least his IQ, his awareness, maybe even his situational pitching, who knows, could be ahead of a guy like Jared Kelly, who's just seen, significant, but still just a prep competition, and Schaumburg, let's not forget. So, to add 3 arms when they could easily have added none. We could have just sort of whiffed at the high end of the draft and international class. The fact that you're adding 3, one of whom's already made an impact on the major league team, they're a pretty good role right now, I have to say. I know the Sox are getting a lot of sort of rough PR, and God bless you guys, you deserve it. You deserve every piece of it. But let's not forget the other hand, which is, despite the fact the system is a little thin, or starting to thin, because guys are graduating out there. This Cuban class is going to help replenish that in a pretty significant way.
Absolutely. And yeah, the comparison to Jared Kelly, or the fact that he might be a similarly rated prospect, is something that makes me very happy, because Kelly was probably the steal of the draft. As far as I did not think he would fall as far as he did. So the fact that the White Sox were able to get both Garrett, both Crochet and Kelly that was absolutely a very good development. And if Vera can be close to either of those guys as far as his projections, then that's definitely a good sign going forward.
Sox area scouts have been playing good hunches. I mean, there was the very, very low drafting of Bryce Bush a couple 3 drafts ago. This hunch they played with Kelly, where the White Sox suddenly are like the sugar daddies in this draft, and they're the ones who are saying, yeah, we're going to hold money, we're going to get, if you drop to us, we're going to get you. And no other team 40 so picks before them decided to pull that trigger. It's astounding. The fact that they got a first round pick, and in fact those draft picks could easily have flipped, is man, whatever they are shaking on the Wheaties in the morning, the area scouts are doing a very fine job. We are going to take a short break here on the podcast. We'll be back with Joe. We're going to talk a little bit more specifically about what the White Sox can do with what remains with this offseason. Not that a lot's actually transpired, because there still is work to be done, and it's not in getting Céspedes, who's not going to be in the major leagues next year. And it's certainly not, you already broke the glass on it, Joe, so it's certainly not in signing Adam Eaton, even though he might apparently be the main player in right field in 2021. But Joe has some ideas about what the White Sox can still do to make this an even more successful offseason. We're going to get to that right after the break. And hey, I don't know what is on these commercial breaks, even when I pop them in, engineering these. You might have just heard a commercial spot for for natural vegan hair coloring. I just heard that the other day for the first time, and I thought that is an interesting sponsorship. So, I mean, I don't know if I can promise any to you, Joe, or me, but anybody on the South Side Sox staff, or maybe reading out there, maybe we can get some samples. Maybe we can send them out. I don't know. Or perhaps you didn't hear that. You heard some fantasy football thing or something. I've heard that one too. I'm not really sure how that gets plopped into the middle of a Chicago White Sox baseball podcast, but thank you for withstanding the break. We are back for the second half of the South Side Sox podcast. We're going to dig in a little bit more to the offseason present time. And the story is linked in the body of this piece. It's Joe's piece from about, I don't know, a week or so ago, where you tried to look ahead and say, okay, what more can the White Sox do to shore up what is a roster that is complete, but is certainly not super strong 1 all the way down to 26. And when you are talking about competing and expecting playoffs and maybe competing deep into the playoffs, you've got to be strong at 26. There's no more punting the bench. There's no more punting any starters, even though right field is looking a little bit that way these days. So again, let's start, Joe, your assessment so far, how you're feeling about the team, and then let's seg into maybe what you think perhaps the most important move the White Sox should still make should be.
For sure. As far as my feelings about the whole team, like, I do believe that they are in a good position for the first time ever to make it to the postseason in back-to-back years. Granted, it's never been easier to do that, but still, it is worth noting, I guess, that I do like their chances of getting back to the postseason, and that is, I guess, that is one of the most important things to be able to say, because the MLB playoffs, if you get in, you could really make some noise just about no matter who you are. And as far as like the holes that were kind of near the top of the agenda, as far as what they needed to address, I thought they did an okay job with the Lance Lynn trade. That was certainly a risk, but I was fine with the logic behind it. I very much was a fan of Dane Dunning, and he definitely gave the White Sox some good starts in this past season, in their first playoff season in 12 years. Like, there certainly are some question marks about him going forward, and I do believe that he was pretty close to his ceiling. So it was still risky to, trade, I believe, 6 years of control of him for one of Lance Lynn. But, this is a year that is certainly, in the White Sox's window. And I think that Lynn will be better in 2021 than Dane Dunning will be. So with that in mind, I'm satisfied. It wasn't a thriller, but I was satisfied with that one.
Yeah, and I'm not sure you make that move unless you've spoken to Lynn's representatives to say, is this guy even going to be open for? Let's just throw something out there. It would be open to be extended at the rate he's being paid now. And if you're getting a no way, he doesn't want to be in Chicago. All right, that's one thing. So clearly it had to be a little bit, again, no guarantee of an extension, which obviously would make the trade much better from the White Sox end, because you're certainly not burning a guy who has some rotation promise for 1 year of, no matter how good the pitcher is. So I think you go, Han's smart enough, I think, to go in having a hunch that this is at least feasible. So hopefully it's not something where, it really is, Lynn for a year, no matter how good it is, and sayonara, because that's probably going to be a little rough to swallow. And we're going to have different conversations a year from now about that trade, I'm afraid. But and you can skip the Adam Eaton part if you want. We don't have to talk about
Okay.
that.
Yes. Yeah. We do not have to address that. Well, the bright side is maybe he's not the ending solution. I'm thinking he probably is for 2021. They certainly aimed low there when it wasn't necessary. If this is indeed the final solution that they have, and it is the plan for him to start in right field throughout this season, then that would certainly be a kind of a similar kind of vibe as going for Nomar Mazara last season.
Well, that's a problem, Joe, too, that we were addressing earlier, where that's 26th spot on the roster is important. You can say, oh, well, there's no limited money. There's a salary cap. You can cut guys away, but not really. Once you make these commitments, which is what made the Adam Eaton deal so astounding, is you commit to a guy for even if that was your 26th spot in your roster, you're still committing to a guy and you're locking in at not an inexpensive rate, by the way. When that's a precious, it's not necessarily the money anymore for the White Sox, although I guess it always is. It's getting to the point where, they're top 15 guys, they're locked in. They're not going anywhere. They're the prime of the team. You got to fill in those other 10, 11 spots, and you can't be frivolous about it. You can't send Adam Eaton to the minors. You're not going to be able to flip them somewhere if George Springer falls to you somehow. So the fact that you're locking in here, and then when Rick Hahn says something like, well, this savings helps us, is going to help us with the next move, when there's only limited moves that are going to be made. I mean, but possibly we're going to talk about Kyle Schwarber here in a second. Okay, maybe you could talk about fortifying left field, I guess maybe DH, the rotation, but that money was probably still there. So sometimes the song and dance with the White Sox is, I mean, I know they got to do it, but it makes you exhale hard and put your head.
There's always a limited amount of money with this team. It's certainly.
We're coupon clippers.
Yes. It's a bit of a reminder of the 2015 to 16 off season where they make the big splash early on, but just couldn't really close the deal. And I'm hoping that this isn't the same idea here. I do feel very strongly that the White Sox, in spite of that similarity, are in a better position to compete in 2021 than they ever were for 2016. But overall, certainly I'm hoping for this to not be a repeat of that off season, because if they're pretty strong as it is, but they still do have some gaps that need to be filled in, and it's a lot of times series in the postseason are decided on which team has fewer gaps as opposed to which team has more star players, and it just doesn't inspire a lot of confidence to have Eaton there as the number one option. We've been told the money will be spent, and it's just a matter of when. And certainly I'm hopeful that it does. And I hope Hahn is correct when he sticks with his statement that the savings will be allocated toward other moves.
You mentioned three names in your article that people have probably already read, and I encourage you to read it again, but we're going to go through them here. And just one of them is a bat, and it is Kyle Schwarber. And I suppose you'd be looking to him DHing, and I guess he'd fill in left field in some sort of crazy clown car battle in left field if it's a platoon, some sort of platoon of Eloy Jimenez and Kyle Schwarber. But do you think maybe broadening it out, because people can read your thoughts about Kyle and you'll share some here, but at this point, do you think a Kyle Schwarber move or what it's probably going to be a minor bat, an Adam Eaton-esque contract, short term, not a lot of big money. Do you think it even matters at this point? You've got Zach Collins, who's lined up for some DH appearances. Yasmani Grandal is going to get DH time. Jose Abreu, with Lord knows, Eloy Jimenez should probably be getting about 150 games at DH, but he won't. At this point, does not to render what you've written null, but is it important still just to get another major league bat on this roster, because you can't necessarily hand it over to a Zach Collins or press some of these guys into that extra time at DH?
Yeah, absolutely. As far as Zach Collins goes, I am just not convinced that he should have a spot on the 26-man roster. He just hasn't really been consistently a viable option.
The Zach Collins fanboys are coming after you, Joe. Just warning.
Yes.
They're coming after
you. Sorry apologies in advance to the Zach Collins fanboy club. Yeah, it's yeah, like I would like for him to prove me wrong, but yeah, I just think that I need more proof before I'd be comfortable giving him a spot on the 26-man roster. It's a tough roster to crack. Getting to the majors is very difficult. But I mean, as far as in a sense, like Collins, like Schwarber, came up as a catcher who just could never really get his defense up to par at that position. And so, like, with catcher being a very, valuable position, premium catchers are very difficult to find, and you typically don't expect as much from catchers at the plate, compared to most, if not all, other positions. Having now that Collins is no longer really a viable option there, outside of some very emergency situations where he may have to enter the game there, but those would be extremely rare. All of a sudden, the expectations for his bat jump up quite a bit with him, being maybe a DH or a corner outfielder, or a first baseman, for example. And Schwarber, well, he shares the defensive deficiencies. I am entirely convinced that he is a major league bat, and with his on base percentage and his power, I would have no gripes about him being the main option at designated hitter. And he'll never be a star fielder regardless of position, and pretty comfortable saying that, but he hits well enough to where I do believe that there would be a spot on the roster for him. And the price tag has dropped considerably on him compared to when there was a lot of hype about him early on in his run with the Cubs. And I would feel pretty strongly that he would fit into the White Sox budget, which is oddly tight, as we've mentioned.
Yeah, Joe, listen. If Zach Collins doesn't break camp with the White Sox, if he's not the third catcher / DH / whatever, who is going to dance for Dubs? This is something you gotta. I mean, the White Sox got to be thinking this way.
Yes,
I mean, either Danny Mendick is alone. He's no guarantee for the 26-man. There could be no dancing for Dubs. And then what are we going to do? We might as well call the season.
True. Yes. The Collins is at the top of the dancing for Dubs depth chart, and I did fail to give him credit for that.
All right. Clearly, if there's money still to be spent, or whatever, the Adam Eaton savings isn't going to be rolled into something else. Clearly, an arm is going to have to be in the mix. A lot of people, including maybe the White Sox, have let it be known that Liam Hendriks is a target. To me, that doesn't resonate like the need for a starter, given that the White Sox still have only 3 solid starters going into the season, which again is maybe more than other teams. But if you're planning on playing into October or November or whenever it's going to push into this year, you might need, more than that, at least to get there. Once you're there, maybe you do just need the 3, but you got to have more than 3 to get there. So clearly a number 4 starter seems to be on the shopping list. Let's just put the closer nonsense to the side because we just should. But 2 of the names you came up with, one, very familiar. It's almost like a given that José Quintana is going to come back to the South Side. And I don't think anybody has a problem with that. But of course, I'm more intrigued. And that does help give the rotation some balance that it wouldn't have otherwise by adding another left-hander. But that didn't work out so well with Gio Gonzalez last year. So maybe we shouldn't be so focused on balance. We should be focused on guys who can actually throw more than 3 innings without losing control or getting hurt. So the name that's really intrigued me in your piece, and I'm sure I'll butcher it, but Tomoyuki Sugano, One or the other, I hope.
Sugano is correct. Yeah, you got it.
Sugano, okay. Intriguing. Right-hander, more of a veteran. And I've heard some criticism saying, hey, listen, the last couple Japanese pitchers have come over to the majors have, been handed their lunch. Why are we assuming he's going to be, Tanaka or whoever else? Because there are a couple ugly contracts out there that are just, going to bleed teams dry. Seattle Mariners are under the gun for one. So, of course, there's no guarantees, but the fact that he's got comps that are at least in the ballpark of Maeda, who was virtually Cy Young Award winner in the short season we just had, is pretty intriguing. Start off talking a little bit more about him, because I think that's a player that most of us are not too familiar with.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So Sugano has been one of the leaders, actually not one of the leaders, the leader in as far as pitching in the NPB for a pretty sizable portion of the 2010s, and delivered another outstanding season in 2020. Ever since I started following that league back in 2016, he's always had some really good numbers against the Dragons, my favorite team in that league, and as well as against nearly every team in that time. And I'm not expecting him to be the next Masahiro Tanaka at all, but it's not always easy to transfer abilities from that league to the majors. The majors is just an extremely competitive environment, but his numbers were just outstanding over there, and even slightly better than Maeda's. And I think with just his combination of pitches, he's certainly not a one pitch or a two pitch pitcher. He can keep hitters off balanced pretty easily. He's got great control, doesn't walk many, and overall he's a very good all-around pitcher. And I do think that he has a lot of potential, and he's still at a pretty young age, in his early 30s. So he's got some time remaining, absolutely, with that very strong arm of his.
I wonder if what benefits, or what has proven, based on the first half of our show we were talking about, what has proven to be a benefit of the White Sox, this Cuban connection that extends, of course, all the way back to Manny Minoso, is something that then works against the White Sox when we're talking about bringing in a player from Japan or Korea or any Asian player. Given that there is no Asian presence on the team, there's going to have to be an infrastructure that gets built, which I know is not improbable, and it's easy enough to do, and the White Sox have done it before, but they don't have anything built in the way Seattle might or San Francisco might. And the same thing that sort of makes it appealing, Luis Robert has said, I wanted to come to the White Sox. He knew the heritage, he knew the history, he knew the tradition, and that, of course, and the money got him to Chicago. But it sounds like to me, even deals, he would have chosen Chicago, knowing what the background was. And unfortunately, the White Sox, in this case, when you're looking at perhaps even just chatting with someone like Sugano, might work against them, because they just don't, there's not much they can say. They can't say, we have this infrastructure. We have these tools we're going to use. Of course, we'll import them. We'll pay for them. Obviously that's going to be part of the deal. But fortunately, if you've got such a good connection with, say like Cuban players, well, you're not going to have a great connection with everyone. I guess maybe if you're the Dodgers, I suppose they have a connection with everything. They probably have a training facility on Mars that we're not aware of. They're going to hit everywhere. But White Sox can't do that. Most teams can't do that. So unfortunately, we're talking about someone like Sugano. That certainly might work against them. The market could still fall to them, and I certainly hope they've at least got him on speed dial to monitor the situation, because given this offseason and the billions Major League Baseball has lost, you don't know what might fall to the White Sox. And the fact, I think I've said many times, if they're zagging in a time where everybody else is zigging and sort of like holding back. This could be a really time to strike. It seems like they've done it with the Cuban players, and it might be nice if some of this stuff falls into their lap. I hope they're willing to strike. That said, they have a lot of familiarity with the other guy who you wrote about. Of course, that's José Quintana, a guy who had some struggles in the weird season that just passed, but really up until then has always been a pretty efficient pitcher. He ran into a little bit more trouble on the north side compared to the south side, but I suppose he got a little more run support there too. So it seems like he would be eager to come back. It doesn't seem like the price tag would be too bad. It seems like his stuff is still there. I think this is a Gio Gonzalez move, certainly plus. This is shooting a little higher than that. If they have to settle for Quintana at number 4, I think we're okay with that.
Yes. Yeah, like once again, Quintana gets pretty unlucky, having, the season he had, right before his contract expired. So yeah, sadly, I think his, lack of playing time in 2019 from the injuries may have hurt his market, but his long kind of streak of bad luck aside, I think I would be shocked if the White Sox couldn't give him the same amount of, couldn't give him more run support than they gave him last time he was with the team.
More than 0.
Yes, more than 0 this time around. And yeah, he, despite the pretty high ERA, pitched pretty well. His baseball savant certainly, like his metrics on that side certainly would have led me to believe that was a pitcher with less than a 4.68 ERA from 2019, and his FIP and his xFIP were also quite a bit lower than that. So that was a different kind of bad luck, I guess. He had run support, but as far as balls in play, the luck was not there that time around. And of course, the Gio Gonzalez, this isn't, quite the same tier, but, it's kind of like a similar concept of the contract. But I do have confidence that he can bounce back after the struggles that he had, just even getting on the field last year. He really hasn't had any seasons yet where, he's just been, a liability in the rotation. And once again, he's another guy in his early 30s. Not a ton of mileage yet on that arm, and he would seem to warrant or deserve a contract once again that the White Sox would be comfortable giving out, unless they get outbid, which is very much a possibility. But as far as his abilities on the field, he absolutely would improve the rotation, and that would be a player I'd be comfortable having out on the field every 5th day.
Let's not count our Quintanas before they've signed, but how hilarious is it going to be next August when the White Sox roll into Wrigley Field with Quintana in the rotation, Eloy hopefully not stuck in the netting in Sox Park. He's extracting himself from the netting, so he's able to show up and play left in Wrigley. Maybe Dylan Cease with Ethan Katz's tutelage, perhaps actually stepping up in that number 5 role and kicking some ass. Yeah, who knows? Schwarber maybe. I don't really care one way or the other, but okay, Schwarber. And, Lenny Casper doing the radio call.
Wasn't sure if you were going to mention
Not that we care about the north side, but it's going to be pretty good. It's going to be pretty funny. Even if nothing more happens, it's going to still be pretty funny. Quintana comes over, it's going to be pretty funny. So, all right, let's seg here into, well, I don't know. We haven't really rolled it out yet on South Side Sox, but it's coming. We're going to start with our second veterans ballot, even though they decided to punt that this year, which was unfortunately terrible timing and terrible news for Dick Allen, who very likely would have heard he made the Hall of Fame as he was perhaps succumbing to the cancer that killed him, which again, in the big picture, doesn't make any difference, but it would have been well, it wouldn't have been a bad thing. But they punted that vote. We're not punting ours. That's coming up soon. Then, of course, we have the South Side Sox Hall of Fame. It'll be our 4th vote. And we're going to, of course, do our regular, many, many years we've done it, the regular Hall of Fame vote. And we're going to talk a little bit about the regular Hall of Fame vote, because at least today, I certainly saw some information coming from what appears to be the leading or the most likely candidate to make the Hall of Fame, which is, it hurts to say, but Curt Schilling. He is trying his hardest not to make the Hall of Fame because he's just not smart enough to shut the hell up and just let people vote and maybe let one guy in this year, because it really doesn't seem like this is going to be a very robust class, and it could really be a whiff this year, especially given the other bad publicity brought on, or who had brought on to himself, Omar Vizquel. So give me your read on the Hall of Fame and what you're thinking. Are we going to have a 0 class for 2021?
Well, it's looking like a pretty good possibility right now that, the super rare goose egg ballot comes to fruition. I think with simply the amount of players on the ballot who posted numbers that were good enough, but perhaps had a little bit of assistance from PEDs to get those numbers. I think those players, there are just too many mixed opinions to get 75% of the votes. That would be required. And for the most part, I would agree that those players, I personally wouldn't give a vote to those players. The only one that kind of gives me a little bit of hesitation to vote no on would be Barry Bonds, since he posted just such incredible numbers before he was even using PEDs, or was believed to be starting to use them. If Mike Trout just started using them now after he's already had a Hall of Fame career, it's a little bit of a strange situation there, because Trout already has Hall of Fame numbers. But other than that, there is one player who I feel very strongly deserves a shot, would be Scott Rolen. He was a well above average third baseman with very good fielding numbers, and certainly enough wins above replacement in his career that I believe he deserves a spot. And I feel like, given the results of past years voting, I don't think that he is getting enough credit for the defense, which, regardless of your source that you like to use for fielding evaluations, he's very close to the top of the league in all of them. So that one is certainly that would be one player that I would feel very, very comfortable voting yes on.
That's the name that jumped out at me in terms of worthiness. And you wonder, Joe, if there's going to be a trickle-down effect, given that it's going to be maybe potentially easier, again, because some of these guys are also actually making the case against the Schillings and the Vizquels, probably the two guys with the most momentum going into possibly being elected this year, that perhaps there might be a trickle-down effect where people feel like they have to vote for somebody, and maybe some of those guys who would normally be overlooked, maybe writers, giving them a lot of credit, but maybe voters would take a little harder look at the ballot and say, this is a guy, maybe there is a little benefit for Rolen, and that he gets that little, because you just need that little push. I mean, we've seen it with Vizquel. You get that little push, and we've seen it many times before, and then suddenly there's momentum. And now it seems like it's maybe more of an inevitability. With Mark Burley, first time on the ballot, he's a guy who's just got to clear that 5% in order to get even what you might call momentum, just to survive. And then, who's to say, how the narrative changes over the years, and how he might, a guy like him, there are others who might gain the momentum that they need to just build enough of a case, at the very least, to bring have a legitimate sort of resume to bring once it comes down time, first, whatever veterans vote, they keep changing it. The criteria seems awfully bizarre. But I mean, you just get your name thrown in the hopper there, and you got a chance. In some ways, it's almost easier than trying to clear 75%. mark with voters, because we know they're largely clods and clowns. So the thing I like about Rolen's chances is that, yeah, just maybe the fact that it's like, well, okay, can't vote for Clemens, can't vote for Bonds, can't vote for Children. But at some point, you know, I mean, he is like, what he finished, 6th or 7th maybe last year, I don't know. But, you know, you're going to get to him at some point and say, okay, well, I can't think of any reason why I don't want him. And who knows, maybe he gets the box ticked for him in a way that, you know, maybe would have been over. You know, you got these guys with their arbitrary limits. I'm only going to vote for 3 guys. I'm only going to go for 4 guys. I'm only going to go for 1 guy. We've seen enough of that. Maybe that 1 guy this year is Scott Rolen, because, you know, by default still counts. You know, got Larry Walker in.
Yes, would be nice to see, you know, yeah. I would feel that, you know, if that's what it takes for him to get more credit, then I'm all for it. And as far as Burley's case, yeah, I do think that he'll clear the 5% pretty easily. At least he should. I'm kind of. I wouldn't be like a strong yes for him, but I would give him a yes as far as my vote. I
mean, big hall, tighter hall. I mean, if you're in any way big hall, I think there's room for Mark Burley. If you're not, and there are people who aren't, clearly a lot of them vote and decide that they got to make guys like poor Minnie Mignoso, you know, go through. You know, well, he's still going through it. So the ghost of Minnie Mignoso is still trying to jump through whatever hoops. You know, now we're saying, okay, maybe the inclusion of Negro League stats, now he has more than 2,000 hits. So suddenly everybody's going to wake up and say he should be in. Well, again, whatever it takes. I mean, I know it seems silly to say, well, okay, Scott Rolen is your default candidate because the other 7 are scumbags. So, well, okay, hey, you know, by any means necessary, right? Especially when it comes time to getting momentum. A guy like Tim Raines, you know, there are a lot of weird, uninformed nays early on, and he got enough support. You know, it wasn't quick. You know, Larry Walker wasn't quick. I mean, I'm sure there were many people who got their balance and said, Larry Walker, are you kidding? And maybe by the end they were voting for him. That's all it takes. These guys just need to be led to water, and then they need to have their faces shoved in it so they can drink a little. And then they're like, oh, okay, that was refreshing. Let's vote for Scott Rolen because he's a Hall of Famer. So I'm with you, Joe. All right, we cannot end this up. I got a SoxMath champion with me. I got to talk a little SoxMath. And now tell me about what happened last year, because was last year like a no wagering, just an exhibition situation? I tried to, you know, I watched enough games. I tried to catch who won each time, and there were some weird things where the same guy won like 8 times in a row or whatever. So that was strange, first of all. I didn't really hear about any sort of like playoffs. There's obviously no Sox Fest, so that a guy like Joe Resis can get on stage under pressure, take on some kind of ridiculous, spooky SAT word problem question and, like, you know, come close to solving it like that. So you're not going to get that live experience. So was the last year of this last season of SoxMath, abridged as it was it just exhibition for kicks? Was there a championship that was lost? Catch us up on SoxMath as the champ, and you should probably just retire it in your name.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So yeah, it was a little bit of a disappointing ending. Although it wasn't one that I was, you know, I wasn't expecting anything different, really. There was no postseason, so yeah. While, you know, we found ways to have the NBA postseason and the MLB postseason, we missed out on the most important postseason of all. You know, we didn't have the SoxMath postseason. It turned, like, as far as like the annual championship is concerned, so in that regard, it turned out to be, you know, an exhibition season where, you know, no championship was played.
So technically, your T-shirt can be you can ditch your 2018-19 SoxMath T-shirt, and technically, it's not illegal to rescreen the shirts as 2018 through 20 SoxMath champion, because there hasn't been a new one yet, right?
Yes, I guess.
Or
so.
Forget the years, just say SoxMath champion, because nobody's going to dispute that. You know,
right? Yes.
Sanders, Lazowski, who are, you know, they can beef, but you're like, hey, you know, until you take me out, I'm wearing the shirt.
Yes.
I got the crown.
Yes.
All right, I wanted to clear that up because I wasn't
Yeah.
sure. And, last year we saw like, I don't know, Spanky B, won like 8 times in a row. And, it just seemed there were a lot of names I wasn't used to seeing. I wasn't used to seeing my familiar people winning. And I thought, wait, is this, does this allow the pros to just sort of say, all right, you know what, I'm opting out of the season. I'm not going to expose myself to the SoxMath coronavirus. And I'm going to just train. I'm going to hone my skills for spring and summer 2021 when it counts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess you could say that. Yes. Yeah, I think the bigger reason, though. Well, I mean, I have YouTube TV, which works as a major disadvantage, and obviously with the state of the world in general, I am not going to any, bars that don't have, or that don't have YouTube TV and have it live, so that I can, get rid of the, delay that YouTube TV has. It's like, obviously in 2020 that wasn't an option. So I kind of played along, like, in my head, for practice, but I know that with like, the 30 or so second delay, that there was just no way in the vast majority of games that, I would, be able to win with, under those circumstances. But it certainly is fun to play along, even in that case. And yeah, looking forward to the return to normality, where travel and going to like bars and restaurants indoors is a thing again. But we're now got to be safe, and there needs to be a site for like all the people who have won in each particular day, because like you said, like I'm sure a lot of people, were also like in the dark about, wait a second, was there a postseason this year? Because that kind of information, isn't easily accessible.
And unfortunately, what this season has taught you, in addition to your technological disadvantages, which you do have ways around, which were not feasible this year, is that there's a hungry crew out there. They are gunning for you. We got hundreds, if not thousands of people gunning for SoxMath 10 on. Yeah, you got the crown, and you're not giving it away. Plus, once they get on that stage, as long as you make it to that stage, you've been there.
Yes.
These newbies, they it could be jitters, the pencil could break. A lot of things can happen. You know that. A lot of things can happen when it comes to that.
Very much.
Under pressure, SoxMath finale at SoxFest live. I figure nobody's really holding their breath for me to win, but I just keep always answering with words. And I figure one of these days there is going to be one where the word wins. So I'll be ready, because nobody else, I don't think anybody else is doing that. Maybe a few people, but I figure just one day, accidentally, the answer will be a word, and maybe I'll win.
Yeah, those are memorable, by the way, because like you said, I don't think anyone else has been doing that strategy. But
I can't go to Jason into ever laughing, ever responding. One day I'm going to. Maybe. He seems funny. Seems like he's got a sense of humor. Jason,
I agree.
Got a sense of humor.
Yeah, he doesn't. Yeah, he tends to not be that much of a responder, I guess. Occasionally he will, but
and listen, this is serious business. I get it. I'm goofing with it, and this is serious business. The fact that I'm even daring to goof with SoxMath, I understand. I might get my White Sox fan card shredded or something. So I understand I'm pushing it. So I'm asking a lot here, but you figure in something like 16-1 runaway or something, could just have a couple laughs. But I'm going to keep trying, because one of these days it is going to be the answer to SoxMath will be a word. And I'm going to be ready. And I'll just have my one little cocktail napkin that Jason signed, and I'll put it on the wall, and I'll say, I'm a SoxMath champion too. All right, let's make it happen. All right, well, listen, I did want to address that, because if I got the SoxMath champ, we just got to talk a little SoxMath. But
all right,
I think that winds things up for us for this South Side Sox Podcast 15 Part 2, the sequel, not with Leonard Gore. Again, happy birthday, Lenny. And but thanks, Joe. We covered a lot of territory here. We're definitely going to do this again soon. You've been on several times with the South Side Hit Pen Podcast, which is, let's say, on hiatus. So let's do this again sometime real soon.
Yes, thank you so much for having me on. And yes, happy birthday to Leonard.
All right, everybody. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. If you're watching us on our YouTube channel, because we're not able to host these videos on site any longer. So if you're over here watching us, thanks. Get back to Southside Sox and read some good stuff. We're going to have stuff. Obviously, the holiday is going to be a little bit quieter, but if you continue with the prospect countdown next week, we're going to begin the count up from prospect number 100 with our profiles of more than half of the White Sox system as it is now. So we'll have that going. And of course, we're going to be rolling into our Hall of Fame votes real soon as well. So we're going to continue to have a lot of material for you to chew through. So please enjoy. And of course, many other podcasts as well, including another one coming up on the weekend. And hopefully, birthday boy Leonard Gore will come on with me again soon. And we'll chat a little bit about his recent writing and what's going on in the offseason with the White Sox. But for Joe and Joel Resis, this is me, Brett Ballantini. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. And thanks for reading South Side Sox.